In 2013, a tornado broke all the rules. It killed the best storm chasers on the planet, and for minutes, humanity was blind to what was coming. That tornado was not only the widest ever recorded, but also the most unpredictable. In a matter of seconds, it changed direction, speed, and behavior, defying everything we knew about these phenomena. It reached such brutal strength that even experts were helpless, but the most terrifying thing wasn't its size or its speed. It was the fact that, for a moment, it revealed an uncomfortable truth. We are not ready. On May 27, 2013, the plains of Oklahoma were restless. The air felt thick, charged with an invisible electricity. For the state's residents, storms were nothing new. They lived in the heart of Tornado Alley, where the atmosphere has a habit of unleashing its fury with little warning and even less compassion. That day, however, something was different. By early afternoon, meteorologists and storm chasers began receiving worrying signals. Atmospheric models projected the formation of intense supercells. Conditions were extreme: high humidity, significant thermal instability, and vertical wind shear suggesting violent cyclonic rotation. In other words, the perfect breeding ground for a tornado. But no one, absolutely no one, imagined what was coming. At 6:03 p.m., the National Weather Service confirmed the formation of a tornado southwest of El Reno. Initially, it appeared to be following a familiar pattern. It was moving slowly eastward, gaining strength as many tornadoes do. It was large, yes, but manageable for those who had already faced similar storms. 30 minutes later, that analysis would be shattered. The tornado grew, but not just in strength, in width, in speed, in complexity. In a matter of minutes, it became the widest ever recorded in history, 4 kilometers in diameter. 4 kilometers. Enough to swallow an entire city. The winds inside were estimated at over 470 kilometers per hour. That kind of force doesn't just tear off roofs or topple trees. That kind of force tears away the ground itself, turns cars into lethal projectiles, and transforms the air into a whirlwind of death. The most disconcerting thing was its behavior. Unlike other tornadoes, which follow more or less stable trajectories, this beast began to move with apparent chaos. It changed direction, accelerated, stopped for a moment, and rotated. It was as if it were alive and furious. Meanwhile, dozens of teams were in the area documenting the phenomenon. Among them, one stood out for its scientific rigor and quiet humility: Twistex. Led by Tim Samaras, Twistex was no ordinary team. Tim wasn't a thrill seeker. He was an engineer, inventor, and scientist who dedicated his life to understanding tornado behavior in order to save lives. He was always accompanied by his son Paul, a young man passionate about photography. And alongside them was Carl Young, a meteorologist, an expert in atmospheric dynamics, and a tireless companion in the field. Their goal wasn't to capture dramatic images. They wanted to place instruments in the tornado's path, collecting data on pressure, humidity, temperature, and wind speed that would help unravel the darkest secrets of these storms. That day, they were there for the same reason as always, trying to anticipate the impossible. But El Reno did not let himself be anticipated. At 6:10 p.m., the team positioned itself in a seemingly safe area. They had assessed the tornado's path and speed, and chosen a spot from which they could deploy their instruments and retreat in time. But at 6:14 p.m., the tornado did something unexpected. It turned sharply to the south. This unexpected maneuver left them trapped. The route they were supposed to take was now in the direct path of the storm. Visibility was almost zero. The road was beginning to become congested with other vehicles, some driven out of curiosity, others out of desperation. Tim, Paul, and Carl tried to flee. At 6:20 p.m., their signals disappeared. There were no screams, no drama, just silence. When they were found hours later, their vehicle was unrecognizable. It had been thrown hundreds of feet, deformed beyond recognition. It was one of the few times a tornado killed veteran storm chasers. Not because of recklessness, not because of ego, but because of trusting in patterns that storm decided to break. The death of the Twistex team shocked the global meteorological community, because if anyone knew what they were doing, it was them. And yet, They were obliterated by an entity that moved as if it knew it was being studied. From that moment on, the El Reno tornado ceased to be simply a natural phenomenon. It became a symbol of vulnerability, of humility, of how little we, even today, understand about the power of the sky. The accounts of other hunters who were there that day all agree on one thing: they had never felt so afraid. Many said the storm seemed to wrap around itself, generating secondary vortices that rotated within the main vortex. Some even spoke of the sensation of being inside an intelligent entity. It may sound exaggerated, but those who have been within a few feet of a tornado of this magnitude rarely return without a deep emotional scar. The El Reno tornado didn't destroy cities or level entire neighborhoods, but it did kill the best of the best, and that changed everything. From then on, the unwritten rules of storm tracking were rewritten. What had once been predictable was now a vague threat. What had once been the territory of brave scientists became deadly, even for them. 6 o'clock in the evening became an invisible threshold between the understandable and the inexplicable. What had begun as a routine weather watch, with storm chasers deployed in open fields and television stations reporting regularly, soon transformed into a sequence of urgent decisions, desperate maneuvers, and finally, definitive silences. At 6:12 p.m., the El Reno tornado was already a monstrosity visible even on Doppler radar, but the data revealed little about its true behavior. It was a creature that twisted and turned without obeying any known pattern. Its core was indistinct, its edges branching out like tentacles. Each of those arms could destroy everything in its path. By then, more than a dozen tracking teams were scattered around the storm. These included the Dominator vehicle, famous for its armor designed to withstand the onslaught of extreme winds, and other civilian vehicles mostly belonging to enthusiasts, photographers, or local news channels. But while some moved away, others still tried to get closer. The Twistex team was among them. They had identified a spot where they could deploy their scientific instruments. The goal, to collect data that very few in the world could obtain, even if it meant getting dangerously close to the beast. At 6:14, the unexpected happened. The tornado, which until then had been tracking northeast, abruptly turned south. This maneuver, unusual for tornadoes of that size, puzzled everyone. It wasn't just a change in trajectory, it also changed speed and shape. Suddenly, what had appeared to be a single vortex became a multi-headed hydra spinning within the larger vortex. For those nearby, the world lost coherence. The wind wasn't coming from just one direction. It seemed to blow from every angle. The ground shook, the clouds twisted around themselves, and then visibility dropped to zero. The curtain of rain enveloping the tornado hid everything. The only thing that could be heard was the roar of the wind breaking structures and the low hum, like the roar of a ghostly locomotive that precedes the most intense tornadoes. That's when the critical decisions began. Some crews turned around, others were trapped on dead-end rural roads. Those on Interstate 40 saw traffic come to a complete standstill. People jumped out of their vehicles and ran into open fields, trying to find ditches or depressions in the ground to take cover. Tim Samaras, his son Paul, and Carl Young were near a rural area west of El Reno. The spot they had chosen as a measuring point was no longer safe. The change in direction had left them dangerously close to the tornado's new path. At 6:16, they attempted to withdraw. They contacted another nearby team, informing them that they were moving south to avoid the core of the vortex. They knew time was short. They were experienced, accustomed to reacting with speed and precision. But that storm offered no escape. At 6:20, the radar stopped detecting the GPS signal from Twistex's vehicle. Contact attempts failed. There were no warnings, no shouts over the radio, just a blank space. Night fell with a deceptive calm. The storm, already moving toward rural areas, left behind a trail of partial destruction. At first glance, it didn't seem so devastating. It didn't destroy large cities. It didn't cause hundreds of deaths. It didn't immediately make global news. But among those who knew what had happened, the feeling was different. The world's most respected team of scientific hunters had vanished. And with them, the knowledge, the passion, the lives of 3 human beings completely dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of the atmosphere. Hours passed before anyone found the vehicle. It was completely wrecked, several hundred meters from the road, twisted, crushed. The doors had been ripped off. The chassis was deformed beyond recognition. Tim's body was found nearby, still wearing his seatbelt. Paul and Carl were found a few meters away, showing no signs of having been able to react. The autopsy revealed no prolonged suffering. The force of the impact was such that everything happened in seconds. Even so, the world of meteorology was paralyzed. How was it possible that those who knew the most, those who were most prepared, had been caught unaware? What kind of natural monster had this tornado been? Experts began analyzing the phenomenon's behavior with obsessive attention. Every frame, every radar reading, every testimony was studied. Its trajectory was reconstructed, its internal structure modeled. It was discovered that for several minutes the tornado had up to 4 internal vortices, each capable of acting as an independent tornado within the main vortex. The forward speed, that is, the speed at which the tornado moved over the ground, was estimated to have doubled in less than a minute. This acceleration, combined with the change in direction, made safety calculations fail even for the most experienced. Many of those who survived that day never chased storms again. Others decided to redouble their efforts, convinced that the death of the Twistex team should not be in vain. Tim Samaras was honored at multiple scientific institutions. The community recognized him as a pioneer, a passionate researcher who never sought fame or spectacle. His son, Paul, still young, left a legacy of images that serve both scientifically and as a reminder of the value of family work, even in the most hostile environments. Carl Jung was remembered for his absolute dedication to atmospheric study, his clarity, and his camaraderie on every mission. That day, Reno didn't just destroy a car or take 3 lives. He shattered the illusion that knowledge is always enough. He reminded humanity that there are forces, even today, that surpass our understanding and our preparation. And as the radar stations returned to normal and the sky cleared, one question remained among all those who lived through those minutes of horror. What if next time it's not open fields? What if that force is unleashed in the heart of a city? When the El Reno tornado finally dissipated, the world continued to spin. There was no non-stop coverage on every channel, no apocalyptic headlines. There were no cities reduced to rubble, no thousands dead. From the outside, the tragedy seemed isolated, confined to an open field on the plains of Oklahoma. But among those who understand the power of the atmosphere, one question began to repeat itself like an uncomfortable echo. What if that monster hadn't vanished in rural terrain? What if it had continued on its way to a densely populated city? To answer that question, scientists reconstructed not only what happened, but also what could have happened, and the conclusions were not comforting. The El Reno tornado, more than 4 kilometers wide and with winds reaching nearly 500 kilometers per hour, was just 20 kilometers in a straight line from the urban core of Oklahoma City. Just that, 20 kilometers. Less than many people travel daily to get to work or take their children to school. Had that tornado maintained its initial path before its abrupt turn south, it would have directly impacted the western part of the city, an area that includes hospitals, schools, factories, shopping centers, and several residential neighborhoods. Computer models developed after the event simulated this scenario. The image was devastating. The first to be hit would have been the suburbs. Houses ripped from their foundations, vehicles thrown hundreds of meters, trees turned into spears. People who didn't take shelter in basements or reinforced structures wouldn't have stood a chance. Just minutes later, the tornado reportedly struck hospitals in the western region. Although many medical centers are designed to withstand storms, none are prepared for a phenomenon of this magnitude. Windows were reportedly shattered. Emergency rooms were reportedly collapsed. Stretchers, medical equipment, and critically ill patients were exposed to a storm that was neither forgiving nor selective. As the storm moved toward the urban center, things would only get worse. One of the most alarming aspects of this hypothetical scenario was the analysis of industrial areas. West of Oklahoma City are chemical warehouses, power plants, and oil refineries. The possibility that the tornado could cause fires, chain explosions, or release toxic substances is not an exaggeration. It is a real and measured risk. Such an event would have turned a meteorological tragedy into a multi-layered disaster: environmental, health, humanitarian. But the threat doesn't end there. Under similar atmospheric conditions, a tornado like the one in Reno may not be an isolated event. So-called supercells, the storm formations that give rise to these tornadoes, can generate multiple vortices simultaneously. In other words, while one city is being hit by a tornado, another may be threatened by a second, or even a third. This phenomenon, known as a tornado outbreak, has occurred before. In April 1974, an outbreak of 148 tornadoes swept through 13 states in just 24 hours. In 2011, another outbreak left more than 300 dead in the southern United States. The difference? None of them had a tornado like the one in Reno. So big, so fast, so unpredictable. Now imagine that scenario multiplied. The city under attack, alert systems overloaded, telephone lines jammed, authorities trying to evacuate entire areas with mere minutes' notice. The chaos would not only come from the immediate destruction, but also from the paralysis of basic services: electricity, drinking water, transportation, hospitals. Added to this is the reality of the infrastructure. Many cities in the United States and around the world lack adequate shelter for all their residents. In countries with climates less prepared for tornadoes, such as Brazil, Germany, or even parts of India, a tornado of this magnitude would be simply catastrophic. In many Latin American cities, for example, the vast majority of homes are built with lightweight materials, without deep foundations or protection against extreme winds. A tornado like the one in Reno in such an environment would leave tens of thousands dead. And worse, early warning systems don't always work or even exist. Experts have warned that with climate change, weather patterns are becoming more erratic. What was once improbable is now possible, and what was once possible is now probable. It's not a question of alarmism, it's a question of preparation. The question is no longer whether another tornado like Reno will occur. The real question is when and where. A phenomenon like this has no nationality. It can form over the plains of the United States, yes, but it can also occur in southern Germany, where unprecedented supercells have been recorded in recent years, or in the vast plains of Mato Grosso in Brazil, or in the northern regions of India, where millions of people live in vulnerable structures exposed to the unprotected sky. And the most disconcerting thing of all is that we still don't know how to stop it. There's no technology capable of dissipating a supercell. There's no machinery that can stop a 4-kilometer-wide tornado with winds faster than a bullet train. The only real defense is anticipation, preparation, collective consciousness. Because if such a phenomenon occurs in a large city, there won't be enough ambulances, there won't be enough hospitals, there won't be enough time. We'll count the dead again, we'll search for the missing under the rubble again, and then we'll wonder why we didn't act sooner. The Reno tornado gave us an unambiguous warning. It wasn't the end of the world, but it laid out the script for the disaster, step by step. He taught us what happens when atmospheric chance decides to write its own history against our cities, our rules, and our certainties. Will we learn our lesson before it happens again? The Reno tornado left an indelible mark on the history of meteorology, not only for its devastation and human tragedy, but also for the scientific lessons that emerged from that fateful day. From that experience began a process of profound review that forever changed the way humanity observes, interprets, and responds to the most extreme forces of nature. Before Reno in 2013, tornado early warning systems were already quite sophisticated in the United States. Thanks to decades of technological development, Doppler radars were available that could detect rotation in storms with great accuracy, and monitoring centers issued warnings within minutes, saving thousands of lives each year. However, the scale and speed with which that tornado formed and moved revealed significant limitations. One of the most significant advances resulting from the subsequent scientific analysis was the improvement of mobile radar networks, known as Doppler on wheels. These units are deployed directly on the ground, approaching the storm to capture real-time data with a resolution impossible to achieve from fixed stations. In El Reno, these technologies were crucial to understanding the internal structure of the tornado, although sadly they couldn't save the Twistex team. Today, thanks to the data collected that day and during other extreme events, computer atmospheric models are more accurate. Algorithms have been incorporated that detect abrupt changes in the direction and speed of tornadoes, and artificial intelligence-based systems are being developed that, in real time, can issue faster and more specific warnings for small areas. The goal is clear: to give people more time to take shelter and reduce the margin of error in predictions. But science isn't just focused on detecting tornadoes. It also seeks to understand how and why increasingly larger and more violent tornadoes form. The phenomenon known as climate change has altered many atmospheric variables. Rising global temperatures alter humidity, atmospheric stability, and wind patterns, essential ingredients for the formation of supercells. Some recent studies suggest that these conditions could be generating an increase in the frequency and severity of extreme tornadoes, although there is still no absolute consensus. What is clear is that tornadoes like the one in El Reno, with speeds approaching 500 kilometers per hour and diameters of several kilometers, could cease to be isolated events. The scientific community even has the theory of an EF6, a hypothetical classification for tornadoes with wind speeds exceeding 480 kilometers per hour, surpassing the current maximum on the EF5 scale. Although it has not yet been officially recognized, the debate reflects concern about tornadoes that could be even more destructive than the El Reno monster. Faced with this possibility, the crucial question is whether we are prepared. The answer is complex. In the United States, the country with the most experience with tornadoes, emergency systems, education campaigns, and shelter infrastructure have improved considerably in recent years. However, the speed with which phenomena like the El Reno tornado can change direction or grow in size poses constant challenges. Authorities have invested in awareness campaigns that emphasize the importance of having evacuation plans, sheltering at home or in schools and public places, and not underestimating warnings, even if the storm seems distant or small. The culture of severe weather has changed, but much remains to be done to avoid complacency. In other countries with vulnerable climates or those beginning to experience more frequent tornadoes, the challenges are greater. The lack of infrastructure, technology, and reliable warning systems makes the population more vulnerable. Therefore, international cooperation in meteorology, information exchange, and technology transfer are essential to reduce future impacts. In addition, the scientific community is exploring new tools to improve resilience. These include sensor systems deployed in cities to measure meteorological variables in real time, drones equipped with thermal cameras and sensors to monitor storms, and predictive models that consider socioeconomic variables to prioritize emergency resources. Technology alone is not enough. Social preparedness is essential. In risk areas, educating the population on how to act, where to take shelter, and what to do after a disaster is vital to saving lives. School programs, community campaigns, and regular drills are part of this strategy. In the long term, urban planning must also adapt. Building homes with resilient materials, designing accessible shelters, and developing infrastructure that minimizes damage can make the difference between a catastrophic tornado and one that is resolved with minor losses. But beyond science and technology, the El Reno tragedy reminds us of something essential. Nature is a force that, even if we understand it better, will remain unpredictable. Our respect for it must be permanent and our humility constant. Humanity faces a future where extreme events may become more frequent and powerful. The question is not if they will happen, but when, and how we will respond to them. The El Reno tornado showed us the cruelest and most surprising side of nature, but it also offered us a unique opportunity to learn, innovate, and better prepare. Because true progress lies not only in science, but in how we use that knowledge to protect ourselves, to take care of each other. That's the message the storm left among the ruins. When the storm finally subsided and the sky returned to its usual calm, a stillness laden with meaning remained. It wasn't just the silence in the aftermath, but the weight of what we'd experienced, what we'd learned, and what remained unfinished. The El Reno tornado wasn't the end of the world, but it was a brutal reminder of how close we are to being overwhelmed by nature if we underestimate its power. In that setting, marked by devastation and the loss of 3 precious lives, a flame of hope was lit. Science, human will, and collective consciousness can unite to confront even the most colossal challenges. Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Jung left an indelible legacy. Their dedication, passion, and sacrifice inspire scientists, meteorologists, and ordinary citizens to never give up, to continue searching for answers, and to build a safer future. Today, every early warning that sounds, every drill in a school or community, every technological advancement in understanding the weather bears the invisible imprint of those heroes. Because beyond the tragedy, the story of El Reno is a testament to resilience, learning, and commitment. It invites us to look to the sky with respect, not fear, to value preparation over ignorance, and to understand that protecting ourselves is a collective act where information, collaboration, and solidarity are our best tools. The impact of the El Reno tornado extends beyond the borders of Oklahoma and the United States. In a world where climate change is altering weather patterns and expanding the boundaries of extreme events, the lessons learned are becoming universal. Cities in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania are today more than ever exposed to events that were previously unlikely in their regions. Nature reminds us that its forces know no borders or nationalities. Tornadoes, hurricanes, forest fires, and droughts are global challenges that require global responses. Therefore, science must go beyond laboratories and radars. It must be shared, translated into public policies, emergency plans, and education for all. In many vulnerable communities where access to technology or warning systems is limited, the risk is multiplied. Stories of tragedies that could have been avoided if there had been sufficient information or preparation are numerous. Therefore, the responsibility of the scientific community and governments is also social and ethical. But preparedness isn't just a matter of technology or infrastructure. It's fundamentally a human issue. It's about cultivating a culture of prevention that makes us value time, heed warnings, and act quickly. Every second can mean the difference between life and death. Stories from survivors of extreme tornadoes often concur that what saved their lives was not just physical strength, but the ability to anticipate, trust the warning, and react calmly. And that calmness is achieved only through education and experience, and therefore it is vital that we all understand that nature is unpredictable and that our best defense is to always be prepared. Tragedies like El Reno can be the impetus to transform our way of seeing the world, not just as a place to live, but as a living system that deserves respect and care. In memory of those who gave their all to navigate the storm and all those who have suffered its consequences, the call is clear. Preparation is an act of love, not fear. It is an act of respect for ourselves and those we love. Every community must have clear, accessible, and regularly practiced plans. Authorities must ensure that warning systems operate without interruption and that information reaches everyone, even the most vulnerable. And every person must commit to learning, teaching, and acting. The El Reno tornado showed us an uncomfortable truth. We can't control nature, but we can choose how we respond to it. We can face it with denial and contempt, or with humility and wisdom. It is in that choice that our hope lies, because it's not just about surviving the storm, but learning to live with it. It's about building safer cities, designing systems that respond quickly, and raising generations who don't underestimate the power of the wind or the strength of the earth. The path is neither easy nor guaranteed, but it's the only one we have. Science, technology, cooperation, and awareness are the tools that will allow us to move forward, but only if we use them with commitment and responsibility. So when the wind roars again and the clouds darken, we will not be blind or unarmed. We will have, in our history, in our knowledge, and in our preparation, the strength to face the unexpected. The El Reno tornado wasn't the end. It was a warning and a call to be vigilant, to not let our guard down, and to walk together toward a future where respect for nature and solidarity among people are true protection. And you who are listening to this story have a role to play in that story. You can be part of change, of prevention, of mutual care. Because true power lies not in dominating nature, but in living with it in harmony and respect. If this story touched you, we invite you to share it. Subscribe to continue learning about science, natural phenomena, and how to prepare for them. Be a part of the prevention chain that can save lives. The El Reno tornado left us with a clear warning. The choice is in our hands. Will we ignore it, or will we heed it? If you're interested in learning more about extreme tornadoes, science, and how to prepare for natural phenomena, subscribe to our channel. Don't miss a video and join this community that's learning and protecting itself. Ring the bell and stay alert.